20 minutes or so. If you have any questions for State Opposition Leader Michael O'Brien, now would be a very good time to get in touch with us here at Breakfast, because Michael O'Brien is with us here in the studio. Michael O'Brien, welcome to you.
Good morning, Jeremy.
And also with us, Roma Britnell, who is, of course, a member for the South West Coast. Roma, welcome to you as well.
Good morning, listeners.
And look, the talkback number, if you would like to give us a call, 1300 001 602. I didn't clear with you that you're happy to take calls, but I'm presuming you're happy to take calls.
Absolutely, always.
Or SMSs as well, if you prefer to get in touch via the SMS. 0467 842 722 is the SMS number. Well, I guess first obvious question, Michael O'Brien, is what's brought you to the South West? Is this a place you get to very often?
Look, I'm a regular visitor down here, and I've holidayed down here with the family, Jeremy, and who wouldn't want to be down here? We've got relatives in Port Fairy, as you were saying before. Bit like most of Victoria seems to have relatives down in Port Fairy these days. But look, down here with Roma, it's a 2-day swing. Spent yesterday in Warrnambool meeting with a lot of small businesses. I'm also the Shadow Minister for Small Business, and really just trying to get a handle on how small businesses is coping, post the lockdown, prospects for recovery, how do we get Victoria and this region back to where we want it to be. Also heading down to Portland later today, and then I'm heading off to Hamilton. So look, I just love getting out of Melbourne during non-parliamentary sitting weeks, seeing Victoria and actually listening to people. I think that politicians do a lot of talking in our line of work, but if we did a bit more listening, I think we'd be better at our job. So I like to get out and about and listen.
Yeah, right. And look, in terms of that small business then, and the conversations you were having yesterday, I imagine that there are similar conversations happening all around the state, but did you hear anything yesterday that maybe you haven't heard elsewhere, or anything that's particular to our part of the world?
Well, I'd say that in Warrnambool, and one of the things I'm hearing around the South West Coast, is that when it comes to jobs, the main problem is quite often finding staff. Now in Melbourne, it's a bit of a different problem. We've got a big unemployment problem there. In fact, Victoria's unemployment, it's the second worst in the country at the moment, which is not where we want to be. But in Warrnambool and South West Coast, finding staff is an issue. So we spoke to people in hospitality, cafe owners, publicans, even people in retail, and trying to find the right people for the jobs is a bit of a challenge. So I think we've got to find a way to bridge the gap between those young unemployed people who need a job and those jobs that are available, because it doesn't help us to have those kids sitting at home, and we've got businesses that really need them to come in and work.
Yeah, it's certainly very unusual times, isn't it? Because we've also, on the other hand, got a huge rental shortage, as I'm sure you'll be aware, in our region, Roma, which makes it very difficult for people to move to a place like this in some ways, doesn't it? I don't know if you've got any thoughts about, well, how do we balance this? How do we push people into places like Southwest Victoria, but make it achievable as well?
Yeah, well, we actually had a really good meeting yesterday with Mayor of Warrnambool and other local councillors, and they were saying that there's actually some issues with some of the state planning laws. They take a one-size-fits-all approach, where really what we need is a regional approach that's horses for courses. So that's what we're looking at doing in terms of our policies ahead of the next election, Jeremy, is how can we actually have tailor-made planning schemes that suit areas like Warrnambool and the South West Coast that meet your needs, because your needs aren't the same as those in Melbourne.
Yeah. Any thoughts as to what that might be at this stage? Or is it still a bit of a work in progress?
Well, look, we got some very good ideas from speaking with council yesterday, and their view was we need something that's specific to us and what our needs are, because they're saying what works in Melbourne just doesn't work here. It's too bureaucratic. There's too much red tape. And look, I think Warrnambool is a place that could have a few more people, but you've got to have the houses there for them.
Yeah, and the space as well, which, as you would know, remember, of course, is an issue, isn't it, for us with the housing? Well, the availability of housing stock is a problem, and land as well.
Well, that's exactly right, but it does start with planning, and as Michael said, the councils came up with some really good ideas, quite specific to our area, which would speed up the process and would solve the problem in a much shorter time frame. You know, like I do, that there's plenty of people on the waiting list for housing, whether it be private rental or public housing, and the problem's not going to go away unless we streamline the process and start now.
Now, look, Roma Britnell, you always have a big list of things that you're sort of keen to bring to the government's attention as well. I imagine, are you using this visit from Michael O'Brien to sort of push some of those things as well and make them, or put them on your party's agenda?
Yeah, and the main one, as everybody talks about, is the roads. So Michael's first words to me was, gee, the roads are really bad down here, as he drove into Warrnambool on the Princes Highway. So it wasn't too hard to give him an understanding, and I'll be taking him across to Portland. We might go via the Hayward Woolthorpe Road. What do you think? Would that be a good place to start? So there's just so many roads that it's really obvious, and the community have had enough. So that's our number one ask out of the budget. But there's also other issues like the breakwater here in Warrnambool and the boat ramp, which has been an ongoing issue and came to a bit of a head a few weeks ago with the different, not different, but the high seas that we had, which we get all through winter. It's not strange. It's like when they say the roads fall apart because we've had excessive rain. We always have a lot of rain. It's not unusual. And we have a wild sea. It's why we have shipwreck coast as our name.
Although they were pretty extreme, some of those waves.
Yeah, but we love that, and we can handle that. And the breakwater needs some work to handle it too, and the boat ramp, so we can facilitate the beautiful environment we have and welcome our visitors who want to utilise our spaces.
Yeah, okay. I mean, with those couple of things, let's talk about those things then. So, because these are state government responsibilities, aren't they? So, if you were to be successful at the next election, what would that mean for those sorts of facilities, for example? Could we expect that they would receive greater attention under a Liberal government?
Yeah, well, Jeremy, I think that the state government, I'm not critical of everything they've done, but I think one area where I'm pretty critical is that they've wasted a lot of money on cost blowouts on big projects in Melbourne. And you don't have to take my word for it. The Auditor-General has reported that you've seen multi-billion-dollar blowouts on Metro Tunnel, on Westgate Tunnel, on level crossing removals. And if you just manage those projects properly, you would literally have billions of dollars more money to be able to spend right across Victoria, not just in Melbourne. And when you see the state of the roads here, you see that local councils need support for infrastructure like breakwaters. There's a lot that you could do by just better managing the really big projects, because when you get those wrong, if it's a $10 billion project and you've got a blowout of 10%, that's $1 billion. And just think what you could do with $1 billion for regional roads. Think what you could do with $1 billion for reducing waiting lists in Warrnambool Hospital, for example. So I mean, we really want to focus on getting better value for money. So that means we've got more money available to spend everywhere else.
The government have actually wasted more money on projects than they've spent in regional Victoria. That's really profound.
I know one of the things that you often talk about, Roma, is this idea that the current state government is very focused on Melbourne as well, and that regional Victoria misses out. I mean, once again, what's your view on that, Michael O'Brien? Do you get the sense that we are missing out here? And once again, what would be different, perhaps, if you were in power? Yeah,
look, I think that the government is very focused on the tram tracks. They're very focused on the really big projects, and I understand that because Melbourne's a big city and Melbourne is growing. But we're all Victorians. We all pay our taxes. We all vote. And we're all entitled to a fair share of attention and spending from the state government. I do think that regional Victoria has been missing out in recent times, and I'd like to see a greater focus on regional Victoria. And that's why I'm spending a lot of time, say, non-sitting weeks. I'm getting out of the office, and here I'm in the southwest coast. I've been in Bendigo. I'm going to, I think, Mildura next week, getting out and seeing the rest of Victoria, because these are great parts of the state. There's great opportunity here, but to realise that opportunity, we really need to see investment coming from Spring Street, and it just hasn't been coming for the moment. So I'd like to see the government do that now. Yes, we will be announcing specific policies for the southwest coast before the next election, but I don't want to wait till then. I want to encourage the government in next month's budget to fix some of these issues now, because it shouldn't be about politics. It should be just about getting the right outcome as soon as possible.
Yeah. Once again, that sort of teaser, can you give us any sort of hints of what sorts of policies we can expect?
The boat ramp is a really good example. We don't have to wait. There is a specific fund that the government have set up to fix boat ramps and the like in Victoria, and that boat ramp is the number one requirement needing to be done. RACV have nominated as the number one. So there's projects right now that the government have money for and should be funding here in South West Coast. So it's quite imminent.
I can tell you, Jeremy, I wouldn't have appointed Roma Brittenell as my shadow minister for rural roads if I wasn't very, very confident that Rome would be bringing forward some really good ideas for how we can better invest and fix up and maintain our rural roads. I know how important that is to this region, and frankly, Roma wouldn't let me out of here alive if I didn't come out with a commitment to support better rural roads in this region and across Victoria. So I won't give you a number now, but I can tell you we'll be doing a lot better than the current government is, because when you drive on the roads, and maybe a few more people from the government should be getting out of Melbourne and travelling on the roads as I did yesterday, and when you see the state of them and you feel the state of them, you're literally jumping up and down in your car. goodness sake, we are a first world country. We need to have first world roads.
I mean, with the amount of travelling I presume that you do, just on when we talk about roads, when we look at what we have in the southwest, are we markedly worse than other parts of Victoria?
Absolutely, 100%. And I know Roma has sort of said that to me, but it's as I travel around, I get to do a lot of comparisons. And when you head up the northeast, you're up there on the Hume, and it's 110 all the way, and it's fantastic. You come to the southwest, and it's a very different story. And it's a tale of two cities, and we shouldn't have that sort of disparity in Victoria. So we're all one state, we're all Victorians, we all pay our taxes, and we should all get a fair go.
All right.
And the other thing, though, I will add, was we're going to do it well once. We're going to make sure what the Auditor-General has pointed out, that this current Labor government has no accountability in process, it has no strategy in process, and there's no way of understanding whether the specifications are actually appropriate to the area. We will make sure when we do roads that they last.
An SMS is coming from Luke in Portland just on this as well, which he says, why should we believe Michael O'Brien? Politicians always promise everything, then do nothing. These roads were like this under Dennis Napthine. I've seen more road work recently than any other time. Budget cutting is what will happen, says Luke.
No, well, look, I was the Treasurer who funded the Colac to Winchelsea duplication of the Princes Highway. That's something that Victorians have been crying out for years, and it took a Liberal government, it took me as Treasurer to actually get that done. And at the time we had a Premier from southwest Victoria who understood the importance of these major projects. So what I'd say to Luke is look at our record. We actually did put our money where our mouth was, but you've had Labor governments in power in this state for 17 of the last 21 years. It's probably not quite fair to try and blame the 4 years of Liberal government when we've had 17 of 21 years of Labor.
All right. It's 7:22 here on Breakfast, ABC Southwest Victoria. Jeremy Lee with you this morning, and Michael O'Brien is with us, Leader of the Opposition in Victoria, and also Roma Britnell, of course, member of the Southwest Coast. We've still got a few more minutes. If you do want to quickly SMS a question in, you'd be more than welcome. 0467 842 722. There's one here that's come through that just says Warrnambool Hospital funding, biggest government investment in Warrnambool ever. Thanks. That was from M, whoever M may be. Thank you for that SMS. Any other thoughts you'd like to send through, please do that. Now, I understand from here today you're off to Portland and Hamilton for a bit of a look at some of the major industries there, including a visit to Keppel Prince. Is that right?
Indeed, absolutely, yeah.
One of the things I did want to ask you, there's a report in today's Age, in fact, just speaking of Keppel Prince, talking about some donations made to the Labor Party at a function earlier this year, I understand, in March, a dinner, which I guess has raised some questions around those sorts of donations in light of some future projects that are happening around wind farms and so on. Any thoughts on that?
Look, people are entitled to make donations, but you wouldn't want to see policy dictated by donations. So Keppel Prince, they've got every right to donate to support the Labor Party if they want to support the Labor Party. I'm going to go out there and talk to them about what we want to see for energy in Victoria, what we want to see for local manufacturing. We announced last year when we were coming out of the lockdown, I announced a package of ideas called Back to Work and Back in Business. And these weren't even necessarily policies for the next election. These are ideas that we wanted to see the state government take up right now because we knew that Victoria needed to rebound from the lockdowns. One of those ideas was a $1 billion Bringing Manufacturing Home Fund, because I think one of the lessons we learned out of the pandemic was that we don't have enough manufacturing capacity here in Victoria. We couldn't even manufacture the personal protective equipment we needed to keep our frontline medical workers safe. We were importing it from overseas. We need to have more manufacturing here in Victoria. So I'll be speaking about our ideas for enhancing local manufacturing to Keppel Prince. Who they donate for us, frankly, it's a matter for them, Jeremy. But I'm interested in jobs, I'm interested in local manufacturing, I'm interested in sovereign capacity here in Victoria.
What are your thoughts around renewable energy as well? And because once again, we've got a pretty interesting situation here that I'm sure you're aware of with Moyne Shire, which hosts a lot of wind farms, and they've basically said, no more, we've got enough wind turbines, we don't want any more wind turbines. I don't know, are there other parts of the state that could be doing more here, more of the heavy lifting perhaps when it comes to where Victoria's heading and what we should be doing in terms of renewable energy?
Yeah. Well, look, I'm a former energy minister, Jeremy, so this is something that's actually very close to my heart, and I know our energy mix is changing and we're not going to be able to continue to rely on the old style coal-fired power indefinitely. We know that Yallourn's going to be closing 4.5 years early. Loy Yang, A and B have still got quite a while to go, and it's going to be important that we keep that baseload capacity. We've announced policies for energy from waste. This is technology that's used right across Europe, right throughout Singapore, North America. We hardly have it at all in Australia. I want to see Victoria being the leader on energy from waste. So basically turning what normally goes to landfill, you use that as feedstock to create low emission base load energy. And that's a Liberal policy. I've already announced that, and we will be doing that. In terms of renewables, I think we could do more in solar, particularly around the north of Victoria, up around Mildura, Carwarp. I want to see ideas for wave power. When I was Energy Minister, we funded a pilot program down around Port Fairy looking at the prospects of wave power here, because of course we've got this great coastline, the power of the waves. Other countries have been able to turn that into baseload renewable energy. I don't see why Victoria can't look at doing that as well.
Yeah, well, what did happen with that? Because I remember there were some studies done, weren't there? Or as a test site, I think, that was set up?
Yeah, there was. But unfortunately, the Labor government didn't have the same willingness to continue to make sure that we got it right. As Michael says, it does work very effectively overseas, but that project really hasn't had the will behind it from government to make it successful.
Okay. Look, another very local issue has come through on the SMS as well from Steve McDowell, who's controller of the Port Fairy SES, and this is something you've spoken a bit about, Roma. We've spoken about it on the program as well. They've got some current headquarter issues with a very bad building, basically, that needs a lot of work. They're after some money. What are your thoughts on what should be happening there?
I think our volunteers are just so important. This state doesn't run without volunteers, and the SES go out there when everyone else is tucked up in their beds at night, when the wind's blowing and the trees are coming down. It's the SES people who put on the orange jumpsuits. They go out there, they clear the roads, they fix the houses. The least we can do is give them a headquarters that doesn't leak when it rains. And really, it should be a bit embarrassing for the current state government. And if they don't fix it, certainly we will, but we can't afford to wait 18 months till the next election. I think the Port Fairy SES volunteers deserve some action now.
And once again, it's this Labor government that just wastes money constantly. There's an SES waiting to go into the shared building with the CFA in Port Fairy, and the government have put the money behind the buying of the land, but nothing to build the actual accommodation. So it's another waste project if the CFA build there and the SES can't build at the same time. I'm just so sick of Labor wasting money. That's one thing they do very, very well, is waste money.
All right. Another question has come through, just to return to the Keppel Prince issue. Do you think the Commonwealth should pass laws to make it mandatory for new energy projects to use locally made projects, I guess, to help sort of secure those sort of workforces at places like Keppel Prince?
Oh, look, it's a really interesting question, Jeremy, because we know that the state government had local content laws around things like the Westgate Tunnel. And it was going to use a certain amount of local steel, and then the government went and ignored its own rules and imported it from China instead. So I think we've seen both state and federal governments, they have aspirations when it comes to local content, but when push comes to shove, we've seen state governments walk away from those rules. I'd like to see, what can we do to make our local manufacturing more competitive? How can we get them cheaper, more affordable power so they can compete with countries from overseas? Nobody wants to pay more for projects. We don't want to see Australian manufacturing be much more expensive than other countries. Now, we're not going to compete on labour. I'm happy for us to be a high-wage state and a high-wage country. That supports our quality of life. But when you've got things like really expensive power, that makes it harder for our local manufacturers to compete. So I would like to see more local content requirements, but I'd also like to see what can governments do to help give companies like Keppel Prince an edge by reducing their costs.
All right, we might have to leave it there because local news is approaching. But look, thank you both very much for taking the time to pop in this morning. There were a few more questions that did come through on the SMS at the last minute, which I'm sorry we won't get to this morning, including one from Robert from Portland about, I think, doing a bypass through Winchelsea, which I don't know if that's on the cards or not, but maybe we'll return to that at another time. Michael O'Brien, thank you. Thanks for making the time. And Roma Britnell, thanks to you as well. We'll catch up with you soon, I'm sure.
Absolute pleasure.
It is coming up to local news time now here on ABC Southwest Victoria. It's 7:30. After the news, we'll be talking technology, of course, with Justin Williams.